Hello, everybody, and a warm welcome to everyone from whatever corner of the world you are joining us from today. It's great, those of you that have already put in the chat your locations. One of the brilliant things about this programme is the fact that we have people all with very similar roles joining us from everywhere in the world, and we're delighted to have you all with us today. Today's session is on managing your personal brand. It's one of the topics that we've tried to introduce into this series to help people with their own personal development and also in their leadership development skills. So we hope you find this particularly useful. Our speaker today is Joanne Wakeford, who, as you all know, is a friend to the Client Experience webinar program and has joined us on several occasions to share her insight. I have a big reveal for you, though. You're not just going to get tips from Joanne today. I've had the fortune to already had a preview at her slides. There's also tips included from one and only Dolly Parton. So buckle up, you're in for an interesting ride. And Joanne, without further ado, over to you.
Oh, thank you very much, Judith. Welcome, everyone. So good to see some of familiar names. If we haven't yet met, a pleasure to finally connect with you. My name is Joanne Wakeford. I'm Chief Client Officer with Dentons In-House Solutions, and we are a business of law advisory, helping law departments to optimize the way in which they deliver legal services to the business. Now, I'm going to give you a big forewarning here. This is a topic I'm pretty passionate about. I have been talking to lawyers and professionals about this for many, many years, and I think for me, what's probably most exciting about all of this is watching when people have that sort of aha moment, right? When they finally realize, like, wow, I never really thought about how important this is, or, you know, much more than just my job title at work and all these incredible things I can deliver and I can do. And so I get really excited about being able to help others through this journey, if you will. But prior to launching In-House Solutions, I led a team of about 50 professionals across the country and learned pretty quickly that not only demonstrating our value as a team was important, but making sure that everybody on the team was able to demonstrate their value, to talk about the great work that they do. And so today I leverage those experiences to help guide law departments around the world on a wide range of legal ops topics, but including how to tell their story and demonstrate their team's value. So now we're going to talk today about not only how to build your own brand, as Judith said, but we're going to talk about how you can begin to leverage and support that to build your own law department brand, which we'll get to in a minute. But before we do, we're going to run our very first poll today to get your sense of where you stand with your current personal brand. So which of the following of these questions most resonates with you? Perhaps you think you do a great job of managing your brand already. And if that's the case, would love for you to jump into the chat and share some ideas, share some tips for others. Perhaps you think that, look, hey, my work is really good and I don't need to, I don't really need to focus on managing my brand. I think that work and that reputation really does speak for itself. Or realistically, perhaps you're just too busy. Finding the time on top of everything else to think about your personal brand can certainly be a challenge. I'll talk about, you know, how it doesn't have to feel overwhelming, but certainly there's time to think about that. Maybe you're here because you're not even sure what a personal brand is. What's a personal brand? I want to know how to find my brand. I want to know how to uncover it. I want to know what I should be talking about. So we're going to give it a few more minutes to hear from a few more others on the poll. All right, if we can get a couple more votes, that would be fantastic. I don't want to lead the witness, as they say, so I'm not going to tip the direction in any of the current responses, but I think we could just get a couple more votes and then we'll close the poll. But I do think it's very similar to the session that we ran earlier. So why don't, all right, one more response. Perfect. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to end the poll and share the results. Probably not a surprise to everybody. Too busy to think about my personal brand, followed by, look, I'm here to learn. So that's fantastic. And I do want to hear from the few people that responded to do a great job of managing the brand. If you've got any tips for others, jump them in the chat and love to hear from you there. All right. Thank you, everyone, for participating. We'll have 2 more polls throughout the session and look forward to getting your thoughts on that. So as I said, this busyness idea, we're all very busy. There's a my monthly, or I think it comes monthly, every second month, the HBR, Harvard Business Review magazine, just dropped in my mailbox last week, and there was a great cover article on it called The Busyness Trap. It talks about how as a society, we tend to reward this concept of I'm busy, I'm too busy, right? The author, Adam Waits, who's a professor at the Kellogg School of Management, writes about how as a society, we tend to measure busyness rather than quality of output, right? As it certainly has almost become a bit of a status symbol. I'm sure you've seen it even yourself, and I'm guilty of doing it myself, right? When you're talking to a colleague who starts to talk about how busy they are, what's occupying their time, you maybe feel compelled to say, well, I'm also busy, and these are all the things that are keeping me, occupied. The author has written a book called The Power of Human, and it writes about a story about a man who just recently moved to the United States and thought that the word busy meant the same thing as good. So because when people ask the question, how are you doing? The response was always busy. The same article highlights a study by a psychologist named Timothy Wilson, who did this study on this concept called idleness aversion, which I hadn't heard about until I read this article. But they found that 67% of men and 25% of women would rather shock themselves than sit idle for 15 minutes. Like that's where as a society, we just feel this need to constantly fill our time, and whether, as a colleague of mine likes to say, a former general counsel colleague of ours likes to say, you have 24 hours in the day and it's up to you to determine how to use them. So even in those few minutes, when you're, comparing your insanely busy schedules with your colleagues and your clients, that can be a lost opportunity to highlight your value. Now, to the other person who indicated, you know what, my brand just speaks for itself. And certainly, being excellent and being very good at what you do, shouldn't that just be enough to be judged by? Isn't that just enough to deliver excellent work? And yes, of course, excellent work is critical, right? I mean, there's no question that's table stakes. But according to author Harvey Coleman, who wrote a book called Empowering Yourself, the Organizational Game Revealed back in 1996, so it's a bit dated, but there's a number of other factors that contribute to your individual success, according to Harvey. So your actual performance, how you do your job, your timeliness, the customer service, the quality, all those factors are considered to about 10% of your individual performance. And we can think of this in the collective as well. So you as an individual and as a team. But rather remarkably, how others perceive you accounts for 90%, right? So your image, or in other words, your personal brand, that accounts for 30%. But exposure, whether or not anyone knows about the work that you're doing, accounts for 60%. So it's not enough to just do a good job anymore. Being a legend in your own mind sort of thing is not as helpful. It's really important to think about whether or not anyone actually knows about how good you are. And one thing I've learned through my career, and I tell our in-house clients all the time, is very few people are going to stop you in the hallway and ask you to tell them how amazing you are, or the great thing that you've just done, or the success that you've had. So we're going to talk a little bit about, and we're going to make sure that it's comfortable for everyone, of course. So today's agenda, we're going to talk about what is this idea of a personal brand. We're going to talk about how you define yours, how do you build the brand itself, how do you create your elevator pitch. We're going to give a couple of examples and help you walk through that, and also give some tips in terms of how do I get out there with the art of personal branding? How do I stand up from the crowd? Now, full disclosure, absolutely nothing we talk about today is rocket science. I promise. This is all very simple stuff, but this is just about having a moment to take and understand that these concepts are important. They're important to your personal career. They're important to the department's success, and it's certainly worth taking some time to step back and consider. So, what is a brand? It's not a product or a logo. It's the combination of all those things that come in around the experiences that you might have with that organization. For a personal brand, it's quite simply the same. It's the experience or perception that someone conjures up in their mind when they think of you, or when they see your name on a list, or when you drop an email into their inbox, or you pop in their Teams chat. What do they think about you? What are the attributes that come to mind, or how would they describe you? Would they say, and I'm going to pick on Judith here, Would they say, oh, that's Judith. Oh, I know, she's very warm. I just feel so comfortable talking to her. She's also incredibly resourceful. If you need anything, she'll find the right answer for that. Because she's very connected, she knows so many people both across the firm and in the in-house community. And she's so creative. I mean, this just program as an example of the great work that she and Neve have done together is just quite amazing. Yay for Judith and Neve, of course. So everyone has a brand, right? Everyone does. It's that reputation or how others feel when they think about you. It's every story you tell, every connection that you make, from the kitchen down the hall when you're grabbing some water to maybe the connections you've made in previous CX sessions through breakouts. The challenge is that what you want your brand to be in your mind and what you envision it to be may not be what others see. So why does this matter? You might say, well, you know, I am who I am, right? Well, defining and communicating your personal brand will help to support your professional aspirations in your career. If you've clearly defined what it is you want people to think of you when they see your name or run into you in the elevator or the lift, then you've begun to shape and form your value proposition. Just like products, your value proposition is what makes you unique. It's a summary of why you bring more value, more talent, better insights than someone else. It's a reason why a colleague might say, oh, you should go talk to so-and-so, they're known for this, or why someone might bring you into a particular project or think of you for a promotion, right? It's about becoming indispensable. Now, personal branding is the art of just communicating your brand and that value proposition. It's about making sure you communicate those details in a way that's clear, that's easily understood, it's authentic to you, supported by evidence. Evidence is always good. And you certainly have an opportunity to do that in everything that you do. Now, if you think about it, again, going back to whether or not you're writing an email or it's 5 minutes before the Zoom call starts, leveraging every opportunity is important, because if you aren't actively managing that, someone else is going to do that for you based on their impression. So before you can begin to understand what your personal brand, where you want it to be, you need to take a current state assessment, if you will. So in the absence of understanding the brand, as they say, that gets filled by somebody else's perception. So it's time to take a step back and think about, what messages are you sending? That perhaps you might not even be doing it on purpose. Maybe you're just having a bad day, or you were rushed, or you were distracted. You know, sometimes you're on a Zoom call with somebody and you're like, are they looking at me, or are they doing something else, right? So those sorts of things start to build those perceptions. There's a Harvard study, and now I've forgotten the name of it, but it was basically points to the fact that it takes 8 positive interactions to fix 1 negative interaction. So think about that, and do an audit of those actions that you're taking and understand whether or not those project the tone or the experiences or the attributes that you hope they would. Take a few minutes too and write down, 2 or 3 just brand attributes, if you would. And I use some to describe Judith that you might most directly connect with. Maybe it's intelligent or witty or resourceful or sensitive, or whatever those might be that you feel most connect with you. Write those down, and then maybe connect with others around you, connect with colleagues, connect with friends. Say, does this is this align with your thinking of me? That disconnect between what you believe others see and what they may be seeing is what might require you to just take a step back and think about your interactions and what image you might be projecting. So the big reveal, the Dolly, I was shopping with a friend. We were in a gift shop and came across this coaster. And I regret every time I talk about this that I didn't buy that coaster. In fact, I might have to go back to see if it's still there. It was a couple of years ago. But Dolly is known for this quote, find out who you are and do it on purpose. And I think that is the essence of personal branding. If I may, Ms. Dolly, they'll only simply add one adjustment to the quote, which I would say, find out who you are or who you want to be and do it on purpose. So personal branding, right? You can think, excuse me, I got to get out there. I got to get posting on LinkedIn, or I got to start speaking at all these opportunities. I got to start writing about leadership. Before you do that, it's important to just take a step back and think about, what is it that I want? What is the messages that I want to be sending? Again, what is my brand? What am I about? So think about this in the context of your strengths, your passions, or your purpose and your goals. So this weekend, I want you to take a little sketchbook and write down these 3 little blocks and start thinking through each of these categories, your strengths. What skills do you have that empower you to be the best at what you do? That's your superpower. If you had a superpower, what would it be? Maybe you're an excellent communicator, or you're really good at solving problems or resolving conflict. Maybe you have excellent change management skills, people leadership. What is that? Think of it as though it was a newspaper about you, and it was the top line article. It was the cover title. Pick a name. Niamh leads among executives around the world for getting people to see and believe in her vision. Okay. Think about your strengths. When you're thinking about it, think about examples of where you accomplished a project or a goal, to sort of supplement your strengths with evidence. And we'll talk about why evidence is important. Maybe you have those project management skills that helped you to deliver a major project that was on time or on budget. What was that project? How did your involvement help to achieve success? Stuff all these little stories. By the way, every time something good comes in, a success or a kudos or well done, I like to stick those in a kudos file, or I've heard someone call it a brag book, and keep those things as a reminder for you. So you've got your strengths and your superpowers combined with your passions. What really drives you? It has to be, as they say, people who are passionate about something are more motivated to succeed. But what excites you about your what you do? What drives you out of bed in the morning and makes you run to your laptop? Or maybe there's something surrounding that. Maybe it's finding new and innovative ways that you're delivering value to your internal clients, or is it helping solve problems for others? Or maybe it's coaching. Maybe you're really into pro bono work. Whatever it is, think about your passions. Think about your goals. Again, to adjust Dolly's quote, this is probably one of the most important considerations in the personal branding exercise. It's about being intentional about where you want to go in your career. What is it that you want to be known for in 5 years? How would you be introduced? Would they say, go talk to Niamh, she is known for X? The thing about a personal brand is that most people will determine it in their mind when they're conjuring up their image of you based on what you've done, not what you want to do. So this is why it's important to say, these are my goals. I'm going to actively start positioning myself now to align with those goals through my experiences. And of course, it's okay to be aspirational, right? That's the goal, after all, is all about being aspirational, but of course, being authentic and being realistic at the same time. All of these things, of course, are guided by those brand attributes that you thought about, those adjectives that you described yourself. I like to think of myself, and my husband might disagree, but I like to think sometimes I have a sense of humor. So I like to inject that into my conversations. I like to inject that into, the way that I'm presenting myself. So think about that, obviously being authentic to you. Now, I want to pause there because I do want to remind everyone, if you have any thoughts or any questions, please jump in the chat. And Judith and Niamh, you'll keep an eye on the chat for me, just in case there's something that somebody wants to ask. But really love to hear your comments and thoughts as we move along. So in the process of thinking through my goals or your goals, you might start to think about some of your weaknesses, and that's okay. But do it in the context of understanding, what gap do I have between the goals that I want to achieve and where I am right now? And how do you begin to close that skill gap? Maybe it's through, some continuing education programs or professional development opportunities, or maybe it's experience in working on certain projects. So just begin to, start framing out what you need to do in order to achieve that vision and that aspirational goal. Maybe this means even volunteering for some projects that are outside of your immediate scope, or reading everything you can on a particular topic. It's all manageable. And I've had conversations with in-house over the years to say, I'm really interested in ESG. Like, how do I start to build that into my brand and into my vision? So this is about just building your experiences. And again, don't let this become too daunting. Just start to take some time over the weekend and start thinking about, how do you shape and form your brand? Now, once you've done this exercise, what you're really going to start to do now is think about your personal brand story. And think about it in the context of, your elevator pitch. If you were to introduce yourself, how would you introduce yourself? Your story, of course, needs to be about you. That's the whole point. It needs to be authentic, right? It has to really resonate with what you feel, the value that you add. It has to be simple and it has to be straightforward. Less words is better. Fewer words is better, as they say. I'd like to say that if I can explain what I do to my teenager, that is the ultimate test. As he's on his phone. What? Sorry, Mom. What? Were you saying something? So the words that you choose in your story, they should be, again, aligned with your brand attributes. Think about the words that you use that are punchy, that capture attention. Maybe they might even mimic some of your corporate language and style. But ultimately, your brand story will consist of who you are, ultimately. And I don't mean job title. This is not about your job title. This is about sort of the problems that you solve or the opportunities that you create, right? Supported by evidence, examples of where you've recently achieved something that is aligned to the problem or the opportunity, right? And from this statement is how you begin to build your brand, but it also becomes super important in terms of introducing yourself, obviously, to new colleagues, etc. We'll talk about that in a second, but your story, this elevator pitch, is obviously going to be targeted and tailored to your audience and the purpose. So, for example, if you're introducing yourself to a new member of the legal team, it might be different than how you would introduce yourself to the CEO. It can be tailored, of course, for those purposes, but it has to be consistent. So you aren't changing who you are, you're just tweaking maybe the focus of the particular problem or opportunity and thinking through, okay, if I'm talking to the CFO, I might think about, building in how I'm contributing to, top or bottom line. If I'm talking to a colleague, I might think about maybe team engagement. Like, just think about the different aspects that might appeal to your audience. I also like to think about, having yourself prepared. If you were past the microphone in a company town hall, how would you introduce yourself? How would you say what problems you solve or opportunities you create, followed by a short and recent example? And also think about this in the power of three. We were talking about this a bit last night, Judith and I. Having three punchy stories to tell is a great way for people to remember what it is that you do. And this is the awkward part that I'm going to share with you, but you have to practice it. You have to even stand in front of a mirror. And I know it sounds awkward, but stand in front of a mirror and make it so that it's just so natural to you when you're talking, when you're introducing yourself. Because of course, it has to be natural to you. It has to be authentic. Last night, on one of our programs, we had an attendee ask a question about their meeting with their new GC. How do I introduce myself? So if maybe that might be happening in your future or somebody new in the organization. So a couple of quick tips. First, I would find out whatever I could about this new person. What can I glean about their style, their communication preferences? That communication style thing is a whole other topic in of itself. But do they appear detail-oriented? Are they more high level? Perhaps they have particular passions that you share as well. Take a look at what you can glean from, of course, from LinkedIn, or maybe they've done interviews or podcasts or all those sorts of things. So do your research, of course, but then have your elevator pitch nailed and a good recent example to refer to in support of that. And again, think about the words that you use and find ways to reflect and mimic corporate language if possible. So maybe if it might go something like this. This is just an example for somebody who might be in the IP space. I help to support organizational growth by unlocking the value of our IP. Say it, Joanne. Our IP portfolio. I have a passion for bringing tech and innovation into our daily work so we can digitalize some of our processes. And I frequently engage with our key stakeholders in this department to help plan for their needs and address the future competitive landscape for our company. Just recently, I ... fill in an example. Probably could trim some of the words from this as well, but just think about 3 key points that you can deliver that highlight your brand, that highlight the value that you bring and highlight your experiences. Okay, so summary of where we are up to this point. It's not that complicated, right? This is really, I promised you, this is not going to be complicated. This is just about taking stock of where you are, what messages you might be sending right now. Think about what you want your personal brand to be, based on your strengths, based on your passion and your goals, and then start thinking about that elevator pitch. This is something that you should have at hand regardless of, and again, having a couple of different versions of it, depending on who it is that you're speaking to. So now we've talked about our own personal brand. I'm going to pivot for a moment and have another poll, because we're going to talk a little bit about the value that the personal brand brings to the department in itself. So we're going to just take a moment to ask you a quick question. And if you've joined me in previous sessions, you've heard me talk about law department value before. I find that this piece, this personal branding is sort of the legs of the table, if you will, on the concept of department brand. So question for you, does your law department do a good job of demonstrating your team's value? So perhaps, yes, you're using every opportunity that you possibly can. Maybe you guys are, maybe you're doing newsletters, or maybe you're just making sure that there's you have metrics and KPIs, or you're reporting to the board, or you're reporting on town halls, or every opportunity you have. Or maybe you're doing some of that, but there's certainly some room for improvement. By the way, those people, again, who are using every opportunity to showcase your value, throw some ideas into the chat. If you have some suggestions for others, I'd love to hear those as well. Or again, maybe, we're just too busy. And that's obviously certainly a challenge. It's the urgent versus the important, I think, in terms of how do you balance what has to get done in the day, recognizing that particularly now, and I'll highlight a survey that we've done recently as well, but particularly now, this idea of demonstrating your value and removing that black box, as they say, around the department is critical. So we'll just, don't be shy, a few more votes to come in, and then we'll share the results of the poll. All right, we're getting a couple of more sneaking in there. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to contribute to the poll question. All right, we'll give it a couple more votes, and then I'll close the poll. I know Judith likes me to hang on as long as possible, so I'm hanging on, Judith. I'm doing my best. I'm fighting the awkward silence. I think I'm going to shock myself. I would be in the 25% in that category. All right.
You're doing well, and so is everybody that's voting. So we're nearly there. It's just a reminder for us, like, yes, you're all really fully engaged and paying attention. So we know that. So we just like to make sure we give you enough time to participate so you can have your say. But we're at 70%, Joanne. So I think we can close the poll and show the results.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right. So yes, you do some room for improvement. That's fantastic. And interesting, quite a large number of you just simply don't have the time to promote yourself. And why is that important? Again, maybe you joined us for a session, I think it was in October of last year. We had a couple of our former general counsels on the program, and they were talking about what to do to thrive in the context of a potential recession or downturn. And we conducted a survey during that session as well. Thank you again to those who contributed. But you can see that the #1 response was demonstrating our team's value to the business. And this is above defending budget, team management, cost cutting, horizon scanning, all these really important things. At the end of the day, being able to demonstrate your team's value is, as they say, that the best defense is a good offense. So being equipped with your story, being equipped with your narrative is obviously important to making sure that you're prepared in the context of a recession. So as I said, if you've joined me for previous sessions, we've talked about this possible misalignment in the perception of the law department. Maybe you've heard the expression before that, maybe it's the department of no, or the necessary evil. I would just take a minute to think about what drives that perception, right? And it comes down to the brand of the law department. It's driven by all the interactions and experiences that one has with your department, the phone calls, the emails, the work product, the no's or the yeses, right? We can't do that, but you can do this. We talked about how you can really begin to reinforce the brand of the law department by understanding and aligning with your business unit stakeholders, your key internal stakeholders. Understanding their priorities, understanding their levels of satisfaction. And then from there, building a responsive law department, building your strategic plan for the function, understanding how to align resources to the priorities of the organization, how to optimize the function so that you're streamlining legal services to the business. And then from there, reporting on metrics to highlight your amazing momentum against the plan. And then finally, building out a narrative for the department, thinking through, maybe we're going to put together a communications plan, and these are the key messages we're going to focus on. And this is how we're going to make sure that we share our story with the business. Again, it's one thing to make sure you're reporting on metrics and KPIs to your leadership. It's another thing to think about, how am I broadly communicating our success to the rest of the business and what it is that we do. So again, once you've been beginning to communicate that, you're shifting the narrative. So that's, I like the tabletop reference now that I've just given it, but that's the table. That's the surface of the table. It's got the tablecloth on it. It looks lovely. Now imagine if everyone on your team is working as ambassadors of that narrative, and through their own personal branding efforts in the organization, they are now reinforcing the messaging as the table legs, right? Your brand as a department is only as strong as the people on your team and what they're doing to reinforce that. So just a quick scenario, bear with me. So imagine one of your team members, or maybe it's yourself, riding in an elevator with another colleague. They both know each other enough to say hello and engage in a casual chat. So, all right, in scenario one, they both get in on the ground floor and they're riding to the 40th. Okay, so quite a long time together. It's really early in the morning, so no one else stops them on the ride up. You know, the senior colleague asks your team member, how are you doing? And they respond, oh, super busy. Yeah, super busy. And you? Oh, yes, also very busy. No, we got silence for the remaining 38 floors. Okay, so that's one scenario. Scenario two, they both get in, the question is asked, how are you doing? Instead, the team member says, oh, really great, actually. We just learned yesterday that we were shortlisted for an award as a legal department for our great innovative work in developing a preferred panel program. We actually reduced our firms from like 150 to 10, and we ultimately saved, I think it was like $1 million last year. I'm really excited about the project because I was able to lead an important role in it, and found that my negotiating skills were great in terms of getting those best fee arrangements and the best value, maximizing the value from my law firms. So those two different scenarios, completely two different opportunities. One, you leverage the opportunity to highlight a success, not only for you as an individual, but for your team, right? So good for the individual and good for the team. But personal branding is really all about bringing forward the authentic you. And that authenticity, when others begin to connect with you in a way that they believe is really genuine, they immediately starts to build some trust, right? Like the veneer comes down and this is really who you are. And trust is key to building effective collaboration and building those strong relationships. But personal branding is also, importantly, about highlighting your skills, your value proposition, the experiences you've had, the insights you can share, and starting to reveal that to others, of course, is going to start to build trust and a deeper sense of understanding, right? So this is why it's so important to think about when you're talking about your brand as a law department, to think about in the context of all of the individuals on the team as well, beyond just the department. So personal branding, the art, if you will, is really about communicating your brand in everything that you do. It is simply your vision or your brand, what you want it to be, and putting that into place through your action experiences. And I know, and we talked about the busyness factor, and we talked about how there's very little time in the day. But start to think about this as you are your own entrepreneur. You are the business of you, right? So think about it as if you were to hire yourself as your own PR agent. What would you do, and what would you tell yourself? And we all are busy, and I get it, but even finding 10 minutes a day to think through some of these ideas can help you move forward. Think about how you might be able to build out a bit of a mini communications plan for yourself. We'll talk about LinkedIn separately, but even just to start to programmatically think through, okay, who's my audience? What do I want them to know about me? What messages do I want to send? Combined with that brand story, right? What is it that I want about myself for them to know? And thinking through what platforms might exist. Where are my opportunities to promote myself or to talk about, some of my great work? Perhaps it's, law firm events or vendor events or associations and thinking about speaking opportunities there. Or maybe internally, you've got town halls or team meetings, or you've got portals, newsletter opportunities. Whatever it is, think about what you're most comfortable with. And then make sure that elevator pitch, as I said earlier, is rehearsed and you have that digestible, easily understandable, a few version of it for different audiences that you have available to you. And through the process of your plan, I want you to think through, who are my most important stakeholders in two different buckets. The first bucket is, who do I want to know? Who do I want to make sure that I'm on their radar, that they're thinking about me? And then the second group is, who do I want to start to learn from and start to absorb in their experiences and start to learn from them? So almost like your mentors, and maybe not necessarily a formal relationship, but start to think about that group as well. And then even, what about outside your organization? Maybe there's people who have similar passions as you. Think through different groups that might be that you might be able to connect with, like the Association of Corporate Counsel or the Corporate Legal Operations Consortium, if you're into legal operations, or whatever groups might come to mind. And then think about spending some time connecting one-to-one, which is really powerful. Of course, we think about, well, if I just, the one-to-many approach, if I tell everybody what I'm doing, then it's much easier, and one-to-one takes so much more time. But when COVID first hit, I created my friends and family list. So I could be thoughtful and programmatic about connecting with the people that I wanted to remind about what I do and the value that I bring. And in hindsight, 50 was a lot. I won't lie. It was probably too many people. And so if any Dentons folks are on the line, if I didn't get you on the list, I apologize. But this wasn't a one-way conversation. This wasn't about me telling them how amazing I was. That's not what we're talking about here. This was about me connecting and learning about what their needs were at the time, and then finding ways to identify how the value that I bring can support. So think about that in the context of your organization. Who is it that within other business units, perhaps even within the legal team, who is it that I want to connect with to just remind about, I'm interested in hearing more about what you're doing. Here's sort of the things that I'm doing. And obviously find opportunities to build new projects. And the process of your self-reflection, when you're thinking about your brand, you've probably identified maybe a few areas for growth. This is your opportunity to do that. Find projects that maybe you might be interested in jumping in on, offering a second set of hands. Maybe it's that preferred panel example that we talked about, or maybe it's your ESG committee or your legal operations team, whatever it is. Use this as an opportunity to build that experience. Now, throughout all this, I probably say authenticity too much, but it's far too much energy to be something that you're not, right? So if you're somebody who prefers to be or tends to be more introverted, this might sound a little daunting, the idea of standing in the town hall and speaking and talking to associations. There's certainly a lot about introversion we can talk about, but I remember reading and sharing in my network. There's a link at the bottom of the screen, which we can share in the slides, but if you Google the article, it's by HBR in the Harvard Business Review, and it's called Stop Telling Introverts to Act Like Extroverts. And the basis of this article is that while the world of advancing your career may be built for extroverts, right? Going to networking events, speaking at conferences, building your profile, and certainly something like personal branding probably comes much easier for an extrovert. Their research found that those who are introverted may actually find temporary mood boosting feelings from participating in these sort of extroverted activities. But in the longer term, those kinds of activities will drain the social battery for an introvert. In fact, there's studies show, which I found this fascinating, that energy depletion can actually happen within an hour after the activity, and that drain can actually deplete whatever benefit derived from the actual activity itself. So they recommend a number of different things to do to help combat that when you are putting yourself out there and dealing with that social battery drain, including making sure you schedule breaks in between, using meditation. They talk about actually how Barack Obama was an introvert, and so they had to have scheduled breaks in between his speaking activities. I personally love speaking and engaging with people, but I am a bit of an introvert myself. And so in exchange for that energy I put towards those passions, I need to find time to recharge. So I make a point of that. It's it's whether it's keeping my personal calendar open a bit more after an event, or maybe I might, on the way home from an actual in-person event, put my earphones in and listen to some obnoxiously loud music, whatever it is. I make a point of finding that. But what I want to make clear is that personal branding certainly may be more comfortable for somebody who's an extrovert. This isn't about boasting. This isn't about boasting or being overly showy. It's simply about finding the path that you want to follow, and then through action, making sure that people start to associate you with that path, right? So other ways to get there, again, finding one-on-one opportunities to engage, building your expertise, becoming that subject matter expertise through project work. So focusing on building those experiences, or maybe even using LinkedIn or writing content for internally or externally as well. So your personal digital brand, this is where we're leading now to how do you make a mark for yourself, right? Your digital brand is so important now in terms of interactions. Think about it before we meet somebody. If you've got the new general counsel who's joining and you're looking them up online, the first thing you do is look them up online, right? What does their LinkedIn profile say? So making sure that you have that up to date and that you understand that this is really about the business of you, right? So take some time to think about it. We're taught as kids and throughout our careers, don't brag. You should be modest. And of course, this can be challenging for some, but people can see right through self-promotion. So we're not talking about that. What I'm suggesting is just take some time to invest in your digital presence. Again, be your own PR person. Objectively, what would you suggest to yourself? What do you want others to know about you? But you really can control the narrative about what is on your LinkedIn profile. What is it that you're telling others about you? And again, making sure that you're more than just your job title, your all the letters that might follow your name, or the various experiences that you may have or past experiences. It allows you to really show, other areas of interest through following different groups or through highlighting your volunteer experience or other passions. And again, it's important to be authentic as well in your presence. So just a couple of tips for your LinkedIn bio. If you're thinking, all right, maybe I do need to think about my digital footprint. What does that look like? In the first instance, I need to remind everyone, good to make sure that if your organization has a social media policy, take a look at that, make sure you're fluent in that. But making sure that your bio is updated is a good step. I know a few people don't even have LinkedIn bios, and that's fine. But making sure if you want to have one that yours is accurate, it's up to date, it has the right experiences, the right company, that it's personable. It really does reflect your brand, whatever that warm or resourceful or connected, whatever those elements are. And you can do that, obviously by using your photo, through the summary of your experience. At the top line, you've got an opportunity to explain what it is your experience. Think about that summary again in the top line elevator pitch. What are those 3 things that you deliver that nobody else delivers as well as you? What are those 3 points? And think about building that into a very succinct. Oh, we got a question, Jude.
Yep, I thought, Joanne, we said we'd, as anyone posts anything in the chat, we'll try and share it with you all and bring it out. So Eric has asked the question, what would you recommend for turning LinkedIn connections with people with similar interests to you into meaningful relationships? So I might pick up on this one to help you out and give you a breather, Joanne. In terms of, as you can see, Kira's already responded. I would say similarly, as long as it's like an authentic message to a peer. So one of the things we really hope from this program is that you will think about connecting with each other on LinkedIn. You can see your names here. If you can find each other on LinkedIn, then you can build your network. And as long as it doesn't feel like you're being sold to or abused in terms of your generosity of spirit, then my experience has been that you'll find if people are using LinkedIn and you send them a message, they will respond. And I think, like with most things, it's helpful if you've got something to suggest, like why not reach out and suggest you attend this great free program from Denton's, and that they might also find it useful. I'm obviously only joking here, but I mean, what I'm trying to get across is that if you find something that is helpful to be able to share or connect around, that can really work. but also, if you've got something where you think it would be useful to brainstorm an issue, that you put that into your message so that it feels like they're going to have a conversation for a reason. So if you are going to connect over a coffee, what is your purpose for that coffee, so that they feel their time is well spent? So hopefully, if others have got ideas or have found particular angles work well on LinkedIn, please feel free to share in the chat. But otherwise, I'll let Joanne continue for now so that we keep to time.
No, that's great, Judith. Thank you. And for the other comment in the chat as well. I've done this before. I've reached out to someone who was posting a lot about the brand of the law department, and I connected because I just thought, this is fantastic. Let's talk about it. I love this topic. So yes, authenticity, obviously. And that's how you begin to curate your own network, right? Make a list of people who inspire you, and even just following their content too is helpful. You don't necessarily have to connect. What I find helpful and recommend to others is connect with your stakeholders in your organization, connect with your colleagues, start to build that network of your internal, the stakeholders that you've identified earlier. What I find is that people notice external content, probably more so than they pay attention to the internal stuff. You can also search keywords and hashtags, whatever aligns with your passion and your interests, legal ops, innovation, ESG, whatever it is, and start to follow content there and start to curate your own network. And then think about what it is that you're posting. Obviously, in the first instance, I see we've got another comment. Oh, great. Love this. Actually finds that worked very well. Fantastic, Neve. In the first instance, are you liking content? That's a pretty easy dipping your toe in the water. And yeah, okay, I'm okay with liking this. This is okay. Maybe you're reposting your organization content. And when you're doing that, maybe thinking about how you can do it in a way that reflects the work that you do or the value that you bring, adding in personal comments just to position that rather than just reposting. Maybe you're sharing others' articles. If it's not come across yet, I obviously subscribe to HBR, so there is some great content that I find there that I share with others. Or maybe you're even thinking about, I'm going to prepare some new content. And I think the thing about LinkedIn is it's a really incredible tool to talk about your passions and your success. But the trick is in getting yourself noticed. I think we have another question in the chat, Judith, but I'll keep going and you can take a look and stop me if you'd like, because I'm getting distracted. But typically, when you're talking about LinkedIn and posting things like, can't wait to speak at this event, or excited to be nominated for this award, those are good. And it's a first step, but it's very difficult to create attention and to break through the noise. So I would say that there's a way that you might want to think about elevating that and being a little bit more creative with some of your posts. I had actually seen one of our European partners, Mark Elshoff, who's co-chair of our European Data Privacy Group, recently post on LinkedIn. He had attended a conference in Washington, DC, and after the event, when he got back, he posted a few updates for the various sessions, and he used emojis and top line tips from each of the various points. And then he had a selfie of himself in front of various monuments and I think the White House. So really interesting way to capture attention and doing so in a bit of a different way. So thanks, Mark. 5 stars. I saw at the beginning of the call that we had somebody from Vancouver, so shout out. This is a photo of myself kayaking in BC. This summer, I took this photo thinking, I cannot wait to find an opportunity to use this on LinkedIn. So finding an opportunity to build in personal experiences, how to flavor this to create something a little bit different. This post in particular was about a strategic planning session I did in the fall in the context of a recession. And I asked the question, would you get into a kayak on open water without having thought through what you might need? Maybe a bit of a plan? Probably not, right? What about heading into a potential recession without a plan for your law department? So it was just something different. It was something interesting. I wanted this opportunity to share with others that I've got a checklist. If you're interested, reach out. It was very effective at creating a bit of attention and difference. And yes, we were fully planned. As you can see, the water was a little bit choppy that day. So we definitely had a plan in place. This is the article I was talking about earlier in terms of the HBR talking about stop telling introverts to act like extroverts. I think that, you know, my decision to post something like this was a bit of a leap forward for me. It was really in talking about myself as an individual, but I wanted to share this article because I thought it was relevant in the context of what I do, which is a lot of speaking opportunities. And I shared that this is obviously some great tips. These are some things that I find I need to do to recharge my social battery. So again, posting other content or sharing other content, but you know, highlighting how it's relevant to me and what I deliver. All right, in the last few minutes, and I'm going to hand it back to Judith to conduct our final poll, but just a few top tips to take away. Really important to think about Oscar Wilde's great statement, be you because everyone else is taken. This is not going to feel comfortable for you if you're trying to be something that you're not, right? So back to my earlier point, if you're not comfortable doing something, don't do it. Think about other opportunities that you can to share your experiences. Again, maybe you're waiting for that Zoom call to start and it's just you and one other colleague. Maybe talk about some great work that you've just done. Again, thinking about using every interaction to build your brand, finding out what you're very good at and what you want to be. And then finally, asking for feedback. It's a gift. And it's important to consider that as well. So with that, Jude, I'm not sure if we have questions in the chat, but I will turn it over to you as those may come in, and we will run our last poll.
Great. If you will share the poll, I would just comment for a moment on Quentin's post in the chat. He's put the challenge, which I think many of us face, that you're sort of already have established your brand and people are starting to use adjectives to describe you. And they sometimes you feel that they're sort of, you're being pigeonholed or the adjectives are set in stone. And you're like, hang on a minute, there's more to me than what you keep sort of referring to my personal brand as being. So just a few thoughts for you on how you might break out of that circumstance. One of the things I found has worked well is see whether your talent or HR team have some sort of 360-degree survey feedback mechanism available. Because what I find helps is if you ask a wide range of stakeholders to give you feedback, you then know how they are judging you against certain metrics. But more importantly, you can then start to have a conversation with the people that you asked to fill in the survey. And you can share with them perhaps what you're trying to really get known for and seek their assistance and support. And it's amazing how that can alter the perception of your personal brand, because they do start advocating for the skills that you said you're keen to be known for. And then as long as you then amplify through your actions, you know, reconfirm those attributes you're trying to get across, I think you can actually change the perception of your strengths and what it is that you do and the difference you make to those that might currently exist. So Quentin, I don't know if that helps, but I just wanted to share, I think for many people, you can often feel like, you know what, I established my brand, I'm really desperate to move on and evolve it a little bit more from, you know, what I was previously known as. How do I do that? So there we go. If anyone else has any other questions, please do put them in the chat. And if you haven't yet voted on the poll, and I know not all of you have, we'd love to get your feedback, because the whole essence of this program is around driving content and giving you sessions that you and your colleagues within your organization find valuable. And so if you can tell us what you want more of or what's helpful, or whether the kind of range of offering that we have provided to date really resonates, that will be incredibly helpful for us as we seek to build out our program for the fall. If we can move on the slide, I can just cover off for everyone else what is coming up. We've got our last session of this series coming up in a few weeks' time, where we will have the pleasure of the company of Alessandra Kiki, who is head of international at Warner Brothers. So a great job she's got, and I know she'll probably have some fantastic insight to share with you all about her journey and probably her own personal brand. So please do join us for that. One of the other big issues of the moment is around ESG. So we've also recently launched our global ESG webinar series, and that continues. So if you haven't yet signed up for that, you can do so if you just go to dentons.com/ESG, and you'll find the registration form there. As always, if you want anything connected with this program, if you want to find our recordings, they're all on our website, but Neve and I stand ready to respond to you and help with anything we can. So just reach out to cxprogram@dentons.com, and we will always do our best to help. So let's get that. I can't see the poll anymore. Have you shared the results?
I haven't, but I will if you'd like me to. Let's do that.
I think it'd be good to end the poll and share the results so everybody can see based on today's session. Well, it looks pretty evenly spread in terms of generally people being very interested in a wide range of content. So we will seek to try and make sure that wide range of content is incorporated into our next series. So watch out for that. Joanne, a massive thank you again for today. Been a great session, lots of useful tips as always. Your personal brand is outstanding. I hope everyone will connect with you on LinkedIn so that they can benefit from more of your insights. But without delaying any further, I will close today's session and thank you all very much for coming, and Joanne for her great insights. Look forward to seeing you all hopefully on future sessions, especially on the 31st of May with Alessandra.